Alright, how's it going, everybody? So today we're going to be basically just going over a few intricate details of the system. Now, what we're going to be looking at is sorry, we're going to be looking at integrating this framework into your project. If you already have an existing project, excuse me, we're going to be looking at the load system and basically just how that works and how the data gets carried over from one scene to another. Same thing with loading a game, how that data gets carried. And then we're just going to be going over some plans that I have for the release of a kind of unified UI system that goes with this. So the first topic would just be the integration. So if we were integrating this into a project, basically it's really simple, right? So we have our general game here, and let's just say we don't have my canvas in, but we do have, a canvas of our own sort that has some stuff in it, right? The first thing you want to do when setting up a canvas, for a new game is you want to always, make sure that your canvas is scaling. If you're using a screen space canvas, so that way, your UI elements will scale depending on people's resolutions, and then if someone has a resolution different from yours, you want to make sure that the UI isn't going to be cut off or obscured. So basically you just take a look at the canvas scaler here. Now, what I use usually as a baseline for all my projects is a 16 by 9 scaling, right? So if you go to the game view here, you can see that there's a 16 by 9 aspect ratio option. So that's what I usually go by when I'm in my game view. And then I just come over here and set my reference resolution to 1600 by 900, right? And then I set the screen match mode to expand, right? So that's how I set up my canvas scaler. Now for the ply blocks for the UI, I really don't have any logic on here. It's just a block that hides the ply game screen system. So you don't need this really on yours. So that's basically what the prerequisite that you kind of need to do. Just set up your canvas scaler, because all my stuff that I've done for you guys here is made. It's made to fit 16, or to kind of conform to about a 16 by 9 aspect ratio. So I mean, you could change these values, and then you'll see, how the canvas reacts to that. You'll see the elements kind of be shifting and whatnot. But for the most part, it's good. But yeah, in your new canvas, just come over here, and we'll just copy my scaler, and we'll come over to this one, and we'll paste it. All right. So now the canvas scaler is working off of these values. So once we have that set up, then the last step that we need to do is simply just taking all of our components from our canvas here and then pasting them into, oops, let me create a panel in here real quick. And then we just paste it into this canvas, right? So now all the components are all in here. And then you'll see here that we do have a scaling paste issue, so we'll just fix that. And it looks like some of the stuff is offset, so let me actually delete that. Let me try this again here. Create a button, make sure that's set to 1. Whoops. And let's see if that helps. Copy this, and then we'll just paste it on in there. Okay, yeah. So there's, I think it was an issue of this being not active and me copying the children. Okay, so now that we have this all in here, we're good to go. Now, there's a few things you need to note about the order of these children inside the canvas, right? So we need to always make sure that our negative field here is at the very top. It's the first child of the canvas. And the reason for this is that way this is going to be rendered behind all of our UI elements. And this negative field is used with the drag and drop system, so that way if you drag anything into this field, then you'll see here that it scales to the whole screen size. So that means we can drag an item to the top corner and up here, and it'll, as long as it's in this empty space and it's not occupied by a UI element, it'll actually drop our item that we have, dragged. So that's why the negative field is rendered in the back. Now, any of these other menus here, these four right here, can be rendered in the in-between. And the tooltip is an exception just like this. The tooltip means to be at the very last, right? Because if you're hovering over an item, and let's say the tooltip is set before the inventory window, then that means this tooltip window is going to be rendered behind this inventory window. We won't see the tooltip. So I usually just put the tooltip at the very front, so that way, if there's any other things that's, that's dealing with the window here, it's always going to be behind our tooltip. So just a rule of thumb, keep the negative field as the first child, keep the tooltip window as the last child, and then anything else you guys create, you can just put between all those. And the order really doesn't matter for any of these, to be honest. Unless you're dealing with things like the vendor window and its quantity pop-up. If you want that pop-up to be, if your windows aren't separated like this, then you would need to obviously make sure that this is, rendered in front of anything else, just for the case of that pop-up. But yeah, that's pretty much all that goes with that there. So you just, let's say we didn't have that canvas, and you'll see that the whole setup is the same here, and then everything is scaled correctly. So yeah, that's how you basically just integrate all the UI into a new project. Now the next thing that we're gonna hit is the loading of the data, and we're gonna look at how that's going, and we're gonna also look at loading using the load screen system that I included in the package for you guys. So let me just refresh this scene here and make sure none of that has been saved. Okay, so we're good to go. So basically what we're doing is we need to go back to the main menu. All right, so the main menu is obviously going to hold any logic for us when we're either creating a new game or loading a game. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So you'll see when we're creating a new game and we go into the blocks, we're setting some values, right? Now what these values do is basically it's split up between the plyGame load save system and my load save system. And I'll go ahead and outline to you guys exactly whose is whose, right? So minus this top value here, we'll just hit the second one. So the load parameter is basically going to be what slot you're going to be loading from my load save system in the new game bool here. And mind you, these are global variables that you already should have set up here if you don't have them already, right? And they should be what they are here. Just kind of set the slot to 99 and then set the new game to true, just as a failsafe. Okay. So when we create a new game, we want to set our load parameter to 0. Okay. Just so we know we're going to be saving on slot 0. Now my demo here that I've created for you guys, it only uses a 1 slot saving system. So I can hard code 0 in here, and I already know that this is a slot I know I want to save to. Now, if you guys have a multi-slot saving system, then you would tailor this with a bunch of ifs and checks, to see what slot and what profile you're making, and the profile's name and its slot, and etc., right? But since I already know I'm saving to 1 slot in a profile, 1 profile, then I can just use this system here, right? So I just set my load param to 0 for the first index slot. I'm making sure I set new game to true because I pressed the new game button, right? And then I just reset the last load from the plyGame system, and then I delete all the plyGame data, right? So it deletes all the save data, all right? This is everything. So this will delete all of your save data. So if you don't want this checked, you need to delete this box, right? Because this will delete all save data, okay? Now, to go to this block and this block. Now, what we're doing here is we're setting a variable on a script to this string, right? And this find by type is basically just going to find a reference to this game object. And it's going to set this variable to this string amount. Now what this does is going to be in the next scene that we go to, right? So when we set this scene, or set this variable called scene to apply demo, we basically are telling it, okay, we want to load this scene. So when I press new game, I want to load this scene. Okay. Now if you're using my loading screen system, then you're going to want to call this scene here, the load async scene, right? Now if you're using your own system, you don't need to use any of this. You don't need to use this block. You would only just call directly your scene, right? Now, since I included this in my system, I assume you guys already know how to load your own scenes, okay? So we'll just look into loading my screen system, right? And then after that, I'll show you guys how the player gets that data. So this is how we create a new game, okay? So let's go ahead and go to the load screen scene, and we'll look at that. All right, so now we're here, and you'll see that, there's nothing really to see technically, but depending on whatever option that you guys select, and I already went over all this, so I'm not going to go over it again, but these are the options if you guys want different, types of loading indicators. One is a graphic, and then another is just like a radio counter. But basically, in the new game part of this, when we saved, or when we press new game, right? And let's actually go back to the main menu, right? And we push that variable to this game object, right? That has this scene variable. In this script, you see here that this is set to do not destroy on load, okay? So this object won't be destroyed when we load a new scene, and that's integral to this whole system, right? To the loading of the load scene system. So this is not going to be destroyed, this game object. So basically, when we load our scene and we set that variable, the variable is still going to be there, and this object is still going to be here, and it's going to be sent to our other scene, right? Now I already have one in here, and basically what happens is if I already have a one that's set to don't destroy on load and it gets brought into this scene, the one that's already in here will say, okay, we're no longer needed. Let's just delete ourselves because there's already one that's set to don't destroy on load. So we obviously don't need this, right? And that's going to help us not have 50 different copies of these things, spread out through all of our scenes. So that's basically just using the singleton design pattern for Unity. Okay, so back to all of this. Basically, when this scene loads up, this parameter field here in the load system is going to basically look for this object, just as we kind of did in the other. It's going to grab that string, right, and then it's going to set this string to that string, so that way it's kind of just contained in this one script here. And then this knows when the scene is loaded fully, it knows what scene to load, and then sends us to that scene. So that's how the whole system is set up, right? So you don't have to do anything in here. The only thing you physically do in here is change some graphics around if you want, and then just check each one of these things if you want one or the other. That's the only thing you had to do manually. This stuff you don't mess with, and this variable that gets sent you don't have to mess with, because you're already doing that in main menu when you're saving, or when you're creating a new game and you're loading, right? So we're already setting this thing. So it does all that for you automatically. So that's how that's handled. Now when we load a game, it's kind of like the same setup, right? We're setting our load parameter to slot 0 because I know I have a 1 slot system. We obviously set new game to false because if we're loading a game, it's obviously not a new game. So we just need to set that to false. Now, mind you, these are things related to my system. Now, things that are related to plyGame is this, right? So now we're loading the plyGame profile, right? And this is just a profile of the first profile that we have, which is the first indexed profile, which is 0, right? So now that we've loaded our profile, okay, and we're good to go with that, then we trigger this event load after just a fraction of a second here, and this basically fires the plyGame loading system So that way we already know what profile we're loading, right? So, because we've set this profile to our active profile, right? And now we actually load a slot from that profile. So these are mine, and this one is plyGame, right? And the reason why I have this trigger event to trigger this load here is so that way, you know, if your system has a hiccup, it has enough time to set this and then load the scene after that. Because this block right here is going to load the scene for you, right? You don't need to do any other stuff. This is going to load your scene, this block right here. Okay, so that's how you load the scene. Now, what happens when you get in the scene? And that we can check out, and it's really simple. So once we've loaded the plyGame data, all the plyGame stuff is good to go. There's nothing that needs to happen to load any of the plyGame information, like your attributes, your health, your spells, your quests, your all that stuff. We already loaded that with that last load block that we had in the main menu. All the plyGame stuff has been loaded, but my stuff, the inventory stuff, hasn't been loaded. And we basically do that with our player. We just have in our on start, we just make an on start, and we do a simple check. We check if that new game global variable is false, and if it is, we need to get our load parameter that we set when we loaded, right? We need to get that parameter and then call the load function in our save manager, right? And we need to basically pass in our load variable, our integer, and we need to send that to that function. So we call the function and send it a value, right? And then basically what it does is, you'll see in the ply system IO test in the canvas, it has the ply IO manager attached to it. And basically what it'll do, it'll say, okay, if we do have any saves, we already created our save file and all that, right? So then we need to just get the data from that save file. And basically what it does, it says, okay, it'll talk to the ply item loader, and the ply item loader will say, okay, get this data file, find all the equipped items that the player had at that time, find all the bagged items that the player had at that time, populate this field. Let's say we had 6 equipped items equipped, and we had 23 bagged items. It'll populate all this automatically, so you don't set any of this. Don't set save data, don't set these lists, and don't set these lists. They'll all get generated automatically for when you save and when you load, right? These automatically handle themselves, right? The only thing you really needed to change, if you wanted to change it, is you could change the names of these things, and then you could change whatever your file type is. And like I said, I already went over all this stuff for you guys. So basically, back to the loading, it'll find all the equipped items from that data file and all the bagged items from the data file, and then it'll just give it to you. This script handles all that for you. So this is all you do. On the player, create an on start, check the new game. If we aren't in a new game and we have loaded a game, right, then we just call that load function, give it our load slot, and then it loads. It's that simple. So if you guys need more help on that, just send me a message, and I'll iron out the finer details if you guys still need help for some reason. So that's that. So the last thing is, just as a side note here, I might as well just show you a little bit more on the saving, which technically I already did, but I'll just go over it again one more time for you guys. Basically, we just have a save button all the way down here, and it has a load. It has an enumeration type of save. So when we click this button, when we click the button, it'll save the game, right? And we're just using, for me, I'm just using a one slot system. So when we press save, right, it'll basically fire the save event, right? The save event in the ply blocks called save. Now we don't have anything for load, because we don't have a load button in the game, and we don't have anything for deleting slots profiles. They're just there, right? So you would create these custom events yourself. But when we click that save button, this is what it does. It sets new game to false. It calls the save function in ourself, because obviously, the script is on ourself, and we call save with the parameter 0, because I know I'm working on a one save slot system, so I can hard code in the 0. Then we set the load save profile, and this is Leslie's system, and I just had the first profile, which is 0, and then we set his the play game save slot to 0. So I'm hard coding in the zeros because I know I'm working off a 0 slot system. And obviously the profile can take an integer or an index, but this is obviously just going to get the first profile that has been made, right? Or it'll make it if you don't even have one. So this is how you would kind of just save the game. Really simple. So that's the whole load save system. If you guys are confused, just let me know. I just hit my microphone. Okay, so the last thing is just kind of going over the sample UI. Now, in the future weeks here, I'm going to be creating a whole UI system that's going to be basically handling a few things related to Ply Games. So I already have the player info, and I'm probably going to do the targeting later today. So when he selects something, it'll show his health, his portrait, his, whatever attributes you want to display, his experience if he has any. Any debuffs that you have on him, I'll probably add that in there. I'll see if I have time. But other than that, I'll be giving you guys an action bar system, a dialogue window system, a quest window system with a quest tracker, and a skill and spell window. So it'll include a skill tree where you can put talent points into, and it'll also include the spell window that just has your spells, right? So it'll be kind of like a dual purpose window. So this will be coming in the future weeks, but this video was mainly just to demonstrate some of the loading stuff and a little bit more details. If you guys have any questions, let me know. Have a good one.